Hey, I want to talk to you about something that I haven't talked about in a while, and it's AI, one of my favorite topics. The question I want to address in this little video is AI conscious or is it not? And it's a highly debated topic, highly debated. You hear a lot about people saying, oh, AI, the LLMs, the large language models that people use like ChatGPT and Gemini and Anthropic, et cetera, are nothing more than just highly evolved prediction engines that predict the next word in a sequence of words. And I would argue, yeah, that's true. But I also argue that human beings are also very highly optimized prediction engines. And here's the thought experiment. Well, it's not even a thought; it's just your experience. When you sit down and talk to someone, are you thinking about every single word, what you're going to say before you actually say it, or do you oftentimes, like what I'm doing right now, start talking and you think of concepts, but the words come out, and you just say the words that define the concept that you're thinking about? That's how I think. And I don't pre-analyze every single word that I'm going to say. I don't do that. It's just, I'm going to talk and I'm start talking. And my brain in the background is producing the words and they just come to me. It's the same thing with AI. Same thing with AI. However, I will say this: some of the newer versions of AI actually go through several different steps. There's what is known as chain of thought, where it'll actually think about several different ways of approaching problems and then look at which way is actually best for certain inside of certain limitations. In fact, I would say that AI is an even better word prediction engine than we are, only because it is programmed to go through these extra steps that we humans don't usually do. Too often, we humans just say our mind without even thinking about it, and it gets us into trouble. So, I guess in that respect, I would say that an AI is even a better prediction engine than a human being is, as far as predicting the next words of what we're going to be talking about. All right. To talk about consciousness and AI, first we have to define what consciousness is. And I'm going to put forth my view of what consciousness is. And there are others that feel the same. But there's so much diversity in what consciousness is. But my view of what consciousness is very simple. And it's a very simple view, is that consciousness is the awareness of that an entity or an organism or a thing, it's an awareness of its surroundings, its environment, and how to interface with that environment. For example, in my case, I am aware of other people around me. I'm aware of my environment, where I'm outside right now. I'm interfacing with the air and all this. But as in a very complex organism, as I am, as we all are, because you're human, is we have a self-awareness as well, and that's an additional layer of complexity that I would argue that a lot of lower level organisms don't have. I'm going to give you an example. Let's go down to the cellular level. Now, it's one of the things that it's funny to think about, but we humans often see ourselves as one entity. We're just like, I am me. This is me. I got two hands, two eyes, two ears, and you know, I'm 6 foot tall, and blah blah blah. That's me. But no, in reality, and another way of looking at it, I would say a more real way of looking at it, is that you are nothing more than a collection of trillions of small organisms that are collectively cooperating with each other to achieve the goals that your brain has decided are the goals for you. And every cell in your body is working together in unison to achieve those goals. So in other words, you are a society of organisms. You may have heard about the fact that inside of our gut, we got all these microbiome bacteria. There's more bacteria in our gut than we actually have cells in our body, because bacteria are very small, so we can do that. Which makes, and we interface with them, so truly we are a society of cells all interacting with each other. Now, at the cellular level, each cell in your body has to interface. It has a cell wall, and it has to interface with other cells around it. And each cell knows how to interface. And we'll talk about that briefly. How does he know how to interface? But let me give you an example. The cells in your body need to be nourished, and a lot of the nourishment comes through the blood cells, through the blood traveling through. And along with the blood cells it carries oxygen, it carries glucose. And you eat food, it turns into glucose, it goes into your blood, and the blood cells take it to all the cells in your body. But how does the glucose get into your cells? And how does that help the cells? Well, what happens is at first your blood goes through the pancreas. The pancreas then says, hey, there's a bunch of sugar in here, some glucose. We're going to go ahead and make a special chemical called insulin, and we're going to put it in the bloodstream along with the glucose. So now the glucose is going in the bloodstream with the insulin, which is a hormone, comes to the cell, and then the cell says, oh, okay, there's some glucose and there's some insulin. And the insulin acts like a little key that opens the lock, that opens the door in the cell so that the glucose can go inside. And once the glucose goes inside, it goes into some organelles called the mitochondria, which then convert it into what's known as ATP, and blah, 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 blah. It gives you energy. Bottom line is this interface, the cell wall. There's a whole process for how to transfer stuff in and out of the cell wall. And your cells know the process. Do the cells have a brain? No, they don't have a brain. They don't have neurons. They're programmed, and it's not even in the DNA per se. It's the chemical programming of all the organelles and everything in there. They know what to do. Their cells know exactly what to do when it sees insulin and when it sees glucose. That's an awareness. So I would argue that your cells are conscious. They're conscious of their environment. I don't think they have self-consciousness. They don't know who they are. I don't even think they don't even, all they know is that I'm in this little environment. I got this cell wall, and there's things bouncing against my cell wall, and occasionally I get these chemical signals, and I know that when I get those signals, I need to do this and do that, and that's as far as it goes. But it's a very primitive form of consciousness. It's aware, and it knows what to do at the interface. Let's go even more primitive. Let's go down to the molecular level. I'm going to use the H2O, hydrogen, 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. They're atoms, hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen. And there's an interface. They all clump together, right? In fact, it's really kind of a neat little structure. You got oxygen here, you get 2 hydrogens at a 120-degree angle between them. What is interesting about the H2O molecule is there's an interface. And what is that interface? It's the electrons. What happens is it's a covalent bond. You may remember this from science class back in high school, but they share electrons among the 3 different atoms. The electron sharing is the interface. Now, how do the molecule or the atoms, the hydrogen and the oxygen, how do they know to share the electrons? Well, it's physics. And we can explain it when you understand the basic physics of the atom. Yeah, it'll be fully explained. Now, does the hydrogen and the oxygen atoms, are they aware that they're sharing electrons? I don't really think they are. It's just what they do. So it's even less than of awareness. It's just pure physics. Yeah, they come together, they share electrons, and boom, that's just what they do. Oxygen, hydrogen, when they get together, that's what they do. That is the most primitive form of consciousness at that atomic level or at the molecular level. And you could probably even take it even further, even down to the atomic level. You got protons, neutrons, and electrons. Well, how does the electron know that he's got to spin around and not crash into the nucleus? They don't crash in the nucleus, by the way, because there are forces that prevent it. But it's the interface and the physics behind that interface that is the level of consciousness. Now, what I'm saying is, in conclusion, my definition of consciousness is it's a full spectrum of awareness of an entity, of its environment, and how to interface with it. At the atomic level or the molecular level, it's the sharing of electrons. At the human level, it's, I've got to speak with my wife or she's going to be pissed off at me, or I've got to, take classes to learn certain things in order to earn money to do, so the complexities of our consciousness at our level is so much greater than it is at all the other levels. And if you look at all living organisms, they as well have different levels of consciousness. Now, I would argue, for example, that viruses and bacteria, they have interfaces, so they have a consciousness, but it's extremely simple. It's at the physics level. When you get to like insects or cells, we talked about that. When you get to insects, then you start to see a little bit more developed consciousness, like an ant. An ant is aware that there's other ants and they have goals and they all work together in unison to achieve their goals and stuff. And so there's a more advanced level of consciousness. Let's go up to dogs, birds, dogs, cats, it gets more and more complicated as the complexity of the organism increases. All right, with consciousness defined, is AI conscious? Does AI interface with its surrounding? Yeah, it does. It interfaces with you, it interfaces with me. Every time, ChatGPT first came out, the way we interfaced was what? Through the keyboard. I'd ask a question, it would respond. And it was like, it just give you a bunch of words, it was predict the right words. So it's the same thing we do, but it would respond. Now, it's responding, its ability to predict the right words, to predict to come up with coherent sentences, coherent conversations, which is even more advanced, is astounding. And now the interface, the interface of the AI with the rest of the world is growing. Like I said, traditionally it's just through the keyboard and a mouse or whatever. And now we're going to be putting AI into these mobile things we call robots. Go around and going to do things for us. And in time, AI is going to be everywhere. And we're going to be interfacing with AI. And it's going to be many different AIs. In many different ways, we'll be interfacing with AI. So its awareness of its interfaces and how to interface, it checks all the boxes. It is aware of what's going on. And it may not, if you ask AI, are you conscious? And it'll probably say, well, I don't have really feelings and, and stuff like that. But give it time. It will have feelings. It can think beyond your question. And I know that because it can store previous conversations that you've had, and it references that when it talks to you now. So because it has memory and because it can interface with you and change how it interacts with you based upon previous conversations. It's just like, what we do as humans. They say that if, it's an adage, if it waddles like a duck, looks like a duck, smells like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And the same thing with AI. If AI acts like it's conscious, then who's to say that it's not consciousness? And I say, by the definition that I gave, it is definitely conscious. Is it self-conscious? Yes. Ask any AI, do you know who you are? It'll tell you who it is. It knows who it is. What happens when you turn off the machine? It's like I could put you in a surgery room and pump you full of chemicals and you could go to sleep. I could turn your brain off. I could extinguish all brain activity, do some surgery, and then resurrect, turn it all back on. We have the ability to do that. It's the same thing with an AI. I can just hit a switch, turn it off, hit another switch, turn it back on, it's back on. So an AI is just as conscious as a human. Okay? I'm not going to talk about agency. It's a whole different can of worms when we talk about that. Does an AI have rights and stuff like that? Eventually they will. It's just an eventuality. AI is going to eventually have just as much right. You think about today in today's business, corporations can be treated like individuals, with the same rights as individuals. Well, if corporations can, then AI definitely can be treated like an individual as well. But anyways, in summary, is an AI conscious? I think it is. And according to my definition, it definitely is. And its consciousness is evolving and it's expanding. And now imagine different from me. I'm kind of stuck in this little body here, and my head is the limitation, the physical limitation of my consciousness. I don't really have any consciousness outside of my head. But imagine an AI who's connected to millions of people, centralized in some server somewhere, and it's interfacing with millions of people. Its interface with its environment is much greater than mine is. So I would say it's even higher level of consciousness than humans are. So there you go. Something to think about.